to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Guns, self-defense, concealed carry. This is the Patriot Defense Podcast. From the war room in Idaho's high desert, here's your host, Todd Echols.
And I am back. I am back with episode 3 of the Welcome to Guns series. And today, we are going to talk about the 4 firearm safety rules. And I probably should have started and said, I hope everyone that is listening to this is doing well. I hope you guys are enjoying the new podcast that I'm bringing out to hopefully answer some questions. Today, we're going to discuss the 4 firearm safety rules. Last week, we discussed safety and things to consider. Well, this is obviously safety as well. As we get into firearms, and this is kind of what surprises me a little bit. There are these 4 firearm safety rules that apply to handguns, that apply to rifles, that apply to shotguns. They apply to all the firearms, okay? And I'm throwing these out there. I'm going to tell you what they are. We're going to talk about them just a little bit. And they're for new people, right? Some people, I know that's new. Those are for the new people. I don't need to listen to this. Well, I'm amazed at how many people come in and tell me that they've handled firearms for 30 years or more, 20 years, 30 years, 40, whatever it is, right? And they cannot recite the firearm safety rules. It just boggles my mind, right? It just blows my mind. Firearm safety rules. If you're going to have guns, you need to know them. If you don't have guns, they're not a bad thing to know as well, in case you do pick a firearm up. So let's go over what they are. So one thing you need to understand about the firearm safety rules, there is 4 of them, like I've said, and they are set to back each other up and kind of all work together as one. And you'll see that as we go. So let's talk about it. One of the first rules is treat every firearm like it is loaded, even if you know it is unloaded. Now, if you've got a firearm, if you've got a rifle, I'm gonna talk about handguns because that's kind of my thing, right? It's my jam. So if you know that you look at a handgun and you see that the magazine is out, you see that the slide is locked back, you can visually look and see that there is no ammo in the gun whatsoever, magazine is removed, there's no way this gun can fire, you're still going to do what with it? You're going to treat it like it is loaded, right? It's muscle memory. You're always going to treat firearms the exact same way every single time you handle them, okay? So that's rule number 1. Treat every firearm like it is loaded, even if you know it is unloaded. And that brings us into another rule. So the second rule would be what? Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire the gun. Said gun will not fire unless you press the trigger. Okay, not very often anyway. In very, 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 very rare occasions, you'll get a firearm that something is just off with it and it will fire itself. Okay. That doesn't happen. There's a big thing going on. If you do follow some firearms news, the SIG P320 has its issues. Okay. It has its issues, and there's been recalls and lawsuits and all kinds of things. But typically, you don't press that trigger, the firearm will not go bang. So we keep our finger off and keep it typically, never on the trigger unless you're shooting it. And then some people extend their finger out, they take it off the trigger, and they place it on the trigger guard. We don't want to do that either because that is pretty close to the trigger. And if you were to flinch or something like that, you could hit that trigger. You could press that trigger, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so you want to place your trigger finger up above the trigger on the frame of the gun. Okay, so keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire the gun. Now, if you're in the middle of shooting that gun and the gun is out, you're on the range, you've driven the gun out, you're shooting 7 rounds, 1, 2, 3, bang, 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 bang. You don't have to take your finger off the trigger in between each shot. You can leave it on the trigger because as long as that gun is extended out, you are in the act of firing that gun, the act of shooting, you can keep your finger on that trigger. It's when you lower that gun or bring that gun into you that you're taking a pause or you're taking a break or maybe you're done. That's when that finger needs to come off that trigger, okay? So that is rule 2. Keep your finger off the trigger till you're ready to fire the gun. The next rule would be never point the gun at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy. And some people, and I probably shouldn't have to point this out, but I specifically say don't want to point your gun at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy. And I say that kill and destroy, that phrase, for a reason. Most people just say, you don't point anything you don't want to shoot. Okay, well, let's get a little deeper into that. Let's drive home some importance, right? If you shoot something, you're going to kill it or you're going to destroy it. You can't take back a bullet, right? So we never point the gun at anything we're not willing to kill or destroy. And if you look, those 2 rules back up that first rule. Or or vice versa. So you always treat a firearm like it is loaded, even if you know it is unloaded, right? And so to do that, you want to keep your finger off the trigger. You want to point it in a safe direction. Now, if something were to happen and you were to hit that trigger, let's say the gun was loaded, okay, and you were to accidentally press that trigger at the wrong point, that's not good. But if it was pointed in a safe direction, no one's going to die, right? It's embarrassing. It's not good, but no one's going to die, okay? See how they kind of back each other up, that kind of thing. Okay, if the gun were to accidentally actually go off without the trigger being depressed, if it's pointed in a safe direction, nobody gets hurt, and you get a lot of money from the firearms manufacturer because you're going to sue the pants off of them. But that's how they kind of back each other up. Now, the last one people struggle with. The last rule people struggle with. And I've got a few stories, and I think this is obviously they're all really important, but this one's really important as well. It is know your target, know what is beyond, what is before, what is around. And there's all different kinds of people listening to the podcast right now. And some people just don't understand shooting that much. And it's going to seem silly when I say, yeah, you're not going to shoot at a paper target. And as soon as your bullet hits that paper target, it's not going to fall to the ground right behind the target. No, it's going to keep on going until it runs out of kinetic energy or the energy, whatever, to make it fall to the ground, or until it hits something. So when you're out on a range, if you're out in the mountains shooting at targets, a good backstop is what you need, and a good hillside, a big dirt berm, something that's going to stop that bullet. You never want to not have it pointed somewhere safe. And when you're shooting, you're shooting, but your bullet's going to stop on the other. You got to look further than your target. A bullet's going to go a long ways, and if there's nothing to stop it, it's going to go a long ways. And even a 22, a little rimfire 22, a little tiny, tiny chunk of lead, just about as big as or smaller than the eraser on the end of a pencil, they can go 1.5 miles. Not super accurate out to 1.5 miles, but they can reach that distance, and they're going to go. And if you fired that gun, guess what? You are responsible for any damage or harm that bullet causes if they can trace it back to you. In so much that in a self-defense situation, we're going to get back to this because it's kind of what I teach, right? In a self-defense situation, if you have to fire your gun, you have to defend yourself. You're in a situation, there's a threat, you got to defend yourself. You're out in the Walmart, the parking lot, whatever. You draw your gun, you fire twice. The first round misses. So you're on that trigger again. You crack off that second, break that second shot. The second shot, the bullet goes, it hits the threat, stops whatever's happening. You save the day. You're a hero. But where did that first round go? Because you're responsible for anything that happened with it or anything that it did. So did it hit a building or a car? Because you're responsible for that damage. Did it take the life of an innocent bystander? Because that's involuntary manslaughter, and you will go to prison for that. You aren't law enforcement. You don't have qualified immunity. Whenever you press the trigger on that gun, you are responsible for what that bullet does. Okay, if it hits an innocent bystander, you'll go to prison for that, just like I said. But not only that, is you have to live with that. You took someone's life. It wasn't on purpose, but it happened, right? And as we get further down the road and we start talking about training and taking classes and stuff like that, we'll talk about how important that is, that you need to learn how to be proficient and accurate with your firearms because of the fact that you are responsible for every round that leaves your gun, even if it's not your gun. If I was out on the range and I borrowed a buddy's gun and I shot it over the berm, I'm responsible for that. Not my buddy, not because he owns the gun. I pressed the trigger. That is my bullet. And guess what? You can't take back a bullet. There was a story, one of the neighboring states, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was in Utah. There were some guys out. They were going to sight in their rifles for hunting. They went out. There's this big grove of, I think, quaking aspens or something, and it was behind them. And so they set their target up between them and the trees, and they were shooting at this cardboard, trying to get their rifles all dialed in for big game hunting. And they thought, oh, that group of trees, that'll stop that rifle round. Like it'll, you know what? It did not. And you can't assume that it's always going to. That is a bad idea. And what happened when they were shooting that rifle, the round zipped through those trees, and it went in to a car was driving down the road with a mom and a dad and their small child was in the back seat. That round went through those trees, went into the car, hit the car, and killed the little boy in the back seat. All because they weren't obeying the rules. They weren't obeying the common sense. They didn't have a good backstop, right? They weren't paying attention to what could happen. They were just so nearsighted. They were focused on the target. They didn't focus on anything else, and that's bad. Even in hunter safety, they will talk about that. They'll talk about the basic safety rules, and they'll talk about knowing your target, and they'll talk about being responsible for the rounds when you shoot them. I spent about 6 years in Kansas, and there was this guy. I remember the story to this day. It was a news story. He was driving in the country. He was on some gravel road out in the middle of the boom toolies is what we called it out there. And he had his window down, and he felt something hit him in the face. And he reached up and grabbed his cheek, and he noticed he was like bleeding. And what had happened was someone was shooting a rifle. They weren't shooting at him. They were just out shooting, whether it be a deer or a coyote, I don't know, but they were out shooting, and I don't know that they ever found the guy, actually. But he was shooting a rifle that could shoot a long distance, and the bullet kept going. I'd imagine it missed whatever they were shooting at, and that bullet kept going. And it entered the guy's car. Like I said, he had his window cracked. It was in the evening. That round was almost to the end of its flight path. Like it was losing speed, it was losing energy, all that stuff. Like it was going to be just done. But it had enough juice behind it still. When it hit him in the cheek, it pierced his cheek, went into his cheek, and stopped when it hit his teeth. Okay? The bullet was almost done. It was almost done through its little course of flight there. It had run up all its energy, but it had enough to do that damage. You have to be responsible, or you are responsible for every round that leaves that gun. And you've got to know what you're shooting at. You got to know what is beyond, what is before, what is around. That is just basic common sense. So let me just do a real quick rundown on the safety rules one more time. Tried to go into depth on most of them. So I don't want people to forget exactly what they were. But we'll say, and this is in no specific order, but I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the order that I have them in. So Rule 1 is treat every firearm like it is loaded, even if you know it is unloaded. Rule 2, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire that gun. 3 is never point the gun at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy. And Rule 4 is always know your target. What is before, what is beyond, what is around. You are responsible for every bullet that leaves that gun as long as you press that trigger. It's got your name all over it. Those 4 safety rules are 4 safety rules that you never want to forget. We hear about in articles, you see on the news, you see these stories come across, and they say, there was an accidental discharge of a firearm and someone died. I cringe when I read that. I wish they would never say accidental discharge. And I don't like that phrase. I don't like that term because it takes responsibility out of it, right? It was an accidental discharge. I guarantee you that gun did not accidentally fire. It's never an accident. It's always negligence. When people, well, that's pretty harsh, Todd. Why do you say that? Because someone has always been negligent. Someone has always failed to do something, and typically it's follow a safety rule. Because think about it. It's never an accident, because if a gun fires itself, what? If it fires itself, that means someone pressed the freaking trigger. It doesn't do that on its own. And if someone does press the trigger, that's not good. But then if it hits somebody, guess what? The gun was pointed in an unsafe direction. Okay, there's always negligent involved, and I wish that they would drive that home when it comes to things that happen with firearms. It's never an accidental discharge. It's always a negligent discharge. Negligent meaning someone effed up. Someone didn't follow those safety rules. When you're going to handle a firearm, a handgun, a rifle, a shotgun, you have to follow those safety rules. That is of the utmost importance. You have to follow those safety rules. You got to create them, create muscle memory out of them. You got to commit them to muscle memory. And that's how you handle a firearm, whether it be an actual firearm, an airsoft gun that is pretty much a firearm, right? Except for it shoots it like a different projectile, right? But we need to treat all the firearms with those safety rules, those 4 safety rules in mind. So I tell you what, I really appreciate everyone joining me so far on the Welcome to Guns series. And this is, like I said, episode 3. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm able to really hone in on some questions I think that would help people as they move forward in their firearms journey. If you liked it, if it helped you, that's great. Do me a favor, share it with someone. Get the word out. I don't care where you share it. Share it on social media. Shoot someone a text message, your buddy a text with the link. You know someone that just bought a gun and they're pretty new. These might be good episodes, a good podcast for them to listen to. Again, I do lots of training podcasts as well. So these are taking place on Wednesday. I also do training type podcasts on Monday. And then I have my basic kind of hodgepodge political / what gun are you shooting, what's new to the market, just a kind of a conversational type podcast on the weekend. So that's 3 podcasts a week. They're all free, man. Just hit subscribe. That help me out a bunch. Share it with everyone you know. Again, if you ever have any questions, you got a question you want to reach out and say, hey, I've always wondered this, or hey, I just don't want to ask anyone this. Go ahead and ask me. Shoot me an email. The email, you can find the email down there in the podcast description. You can even find, I believe, my cell phone number's there. But you can call that number. You can text that number. That's going to be area code 620-794-6223. Area code 620-794-6223. Again, I appreciate everyone that is enjoying these podcasts. I know I'm really kind of enjoying doing them. So I'll tell you what, everyone, you guys, thanks for listening and have a great week.